Some Canadian salted butters pack 5 to 6 grams of saturated fat into a tiny 10-gram pat, and that can burn through the 20-gram daily value Health Canada uses before lunch even shows up. Pick the wrong brick and you are stacking fat and salt into every meal without noticing. Today, we are ranking 8 Canadian butters to avoid and 3 worth buying, using the same serving sizes so every comparison stays fair. This list comes from our 15-page research report, built from label panels, product listings, and Canadian heart and sodium guidance. Then cross-check line by line so you can verify the numbers. Stay until the end, because the real number one problem is a daily habit most people never count. And once you spot it, you will catch it every time you open your fridge. Number 8. Gay Leah's Salted Butter. Gay Leah salted butter shows up everywhere, and that blue wrapper makes it feel like the default. Gay Leah began in 1958 as a farmer-owned co-op, so the brand story sounds warm, but your body only sees the numbers. A 10-gram serving lists about 60 calories, 6 grams fat, 2.5 grams saturated fat, and 60 milligrams sodium. Health Canada uses 20 grams as the daily value for saturated plus trans fat, so one small pat can eat around 13%. Here is the real trick. Your breakfast rarely stays at 10 grams. 2 thick toast slices, eggs cooked in butter, and 1 extra swipe can hit 20 to 30 grams fast, which can mean 7 to 8 grams saturated fat before noon. Heart and Stroke says, saturated fat raises LDL cholesterol levels in the blood, and that sentence has teeth. Then sodium piles on. Canada reports average intake around 2,700 to 3,400 milligrams, while guidance points to a 2,300 milligrams upper level. Add salted butter to bread, cheese, or deli meat, and you build a salty base that follows you into lunch, which sets up the next butter problem. So when you see the wrapper, ask yourself, how many pats will you use today? Number 7. Compliments salted butter. Compliments salted butter looks like the plain store brick, and that plain look can lower your guard. Sobeys sells it under the Compliments name at Sobeys, Safeway, IGA, and FreshCo, so it slips into carts all across Canada. Per 10 grams, the label shows 70 calories, 8 grams fat, 5 grams saturated, 0.3 grams trans, and about 70 milligrams sodium. Health Canada puts saturated plus trans at 20 grams daily, which means one small serving already burns about a quarter of that line. Now think about how people cook. A little chunk in the pan can be 3 servings, then butter on bread adds another, and suddenly you used 40 grams total without noticing. Heart and Stroke warns, eating too much for saturated and trans fats may raise unhealthy LDL cholesterol. So this brick can push LDL the slow way, day after day. The sugar and carb lines sit at 0, so some shoppers treat it like a free pass, and that assumption can backfire. Keep an eye on the 0.3 grams trans line too, because it tags along with the saturated fat. Before we reveal the next worst butter brands, remember to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on more Canadian health and food investigations. Next, an organic label tries to calm you while the fat count stays steady. Watch the wrapper closely. Number 6. PC Organic Salted Butter. PC Organic Salted Butter sits in the Better Choices corner of the fridge, and that green banner can make you relax fast. The problem is that butter stays butter, even when the cows follow organic rules. A 10-gram serving shows 70 calories, 8 grams fat, 5 grams saturated, 0.3 grams trans, and around 60 milligrams sodium. Health Canada uses 20 grams daily for saturated plus trans fat, so your small pat can eat close to a quarter of the day. Canada saw organic shopping rise through the 1990s, and brands learned that the label can feel like protection. Do you ever spread more because it costs more, or cook with it because it feels cleaner? Eating Well quoted a cardiologist saying, limiting saturated fats is one of the biggest levers for lowering LDL. And that applies here with no exceptions. When one meal uses 30 grams butter, the organic badge does not soften the saturated fat load, and the sodium still tags along. If you want the taste, keep portions tight and use salt later, because that gives you control. Next up, the cheapest brick shows how price turns just a little into a habit. You will see it everywhere. Before we continue, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to not miss a single insight on Canadian brands. Number 5. Great Value Salted Butter. Great Value Salted Butter wins on price, and that is exactly why it can become your default cooking fat. When something feels cheap and reliable, do you measure it or do you toss in another slice and move on? On paper, 10 grams runs about 70 calories, 8 grams fat, and 5 grams saturated, with sodium around 60 to 70 milligrams. The USDA profile for salted butter looks similar at about 8.1 grams fat, 5.1 grams saturated fat, and close to 60 milligrams sodium per 10 grams. So the brick behaves like standard butter. The real shift happens in real life. A cookie batch can use 200 grams, a grilled cheese night can burn another chunk, and the weekly total climbs quietly. Canada reports average sodium intake around 2,760 to 3,400 milligrams, even though guidance points to 1,500 milligrams as adequate and 2,300 milligrams upper as the ceiling. Hypertension Canada links high sodium to high blood pressure and stroke, and most sodium comes from packaged foods, so butter stacks on top. Alberta Health Services flags butter as high in saturated fat, so the cheap brick can cost you later. Next, a clean dairy brand sells the same load with even better branding. Number 4. Naturel Salted Butter. Naturel Salted Butter looks like the smart choice because the brand talks about filtration and clean Canadian milk. That message can make you assume the butter plays nicer with your heart, and that is where the surprise begins. Naturel comes from the Agro-Poor Cooperative, and it promotes milk without antibiotics or artificial growth hormones. In the salted butter, a 10-gram serving carries about 70 calories, 8 grams fat, 5 grams saturated, and around 70 milligrams sodium, which still lands near a quarter of the 20-gram daily value. People often use natural in meals that already feel healthy, like vegetables in a pan, fish on a sheet, or plain pasta with butter and herbs. Heart and stroke groups butter with full-fat milk products that can raise LDL cholesterol when you lean on them, so the clean label does not change that effect. Another detail hides in the lactose-free versions. Lactose-free Naturel butter can feel easier on digestion, yet the serving still sits around 70 calories per 10 grams with similar fat totals. If you bought it for a health upgrade, ask yourself what the upgrade targets. Next, a longtime favorite butter shows how trust can lift sodium too. Number 3. Lactantia Salted Butter. Lactantia salted butter feels like the classic you grew up with, so it often gets a free pass in the fridge. The brand started in 1947 in Victoriaville, Quebec, when agronomist Lionel Baudet launched it, and that history builds trust fast. A 10-gram serving runs about 70 calories, 8 grams fat, 5 grams saturated, and roughly 70 to 75 milligrams sodium. Some competing bricks land closer to 55 to 65 milligrams sodium, so each pat can add a bit more salt than you expect. Do you ever compare that sodium line when you grab a brick on sale? This butter shows up in the heavy moments: holiday baking, mashed potatoes, buttered rolls, and rich sauces, which means the rest of the plate already leans rich. Canada's food guide advice, echoed by Heart and Stroke, says to limit saturated fats from fatty meats, butter, lard, and hard margarines, because those fats can raise LDL over time. Lactantia also helped popularize aluminum wrapping, which protects flavor and extends shelf life. That sounds helpful, yet it also makes stockpiling easy during sales, and stocked fridges encourage casual use. Next, an organic butter pushes saturated fat even higher per pat, and the label looks innocent. Number 2. L'Ancêtre Organic Salted Butter. L'Ancêtre Organic Salted Butter sells a wholesome story the moment you unwrap it. The company grew from Quebec dairy families in the early 1990s, focused on organic, pesticide-free production, and it became a major name in organic cheese and butter. Then you hit the label math. Per 10 grams, you get about 70 calories, 8 grams fat, 6 grams saturated, around 0.2 grams trans fat, and close to 75 milligrams sodium. Since Health Canada uses 20 grams daily for saturated plus trans fat, 2 generous pats can take a huge bite. Here is the tricky part. The organic badge can make people spread thicker and cook with it more because it feels like a better choice. Hard and Stroke points people toward replacing saturated fat with unsaturated fats to help lower LDL cholesterol, so extra pats still move the wrong way. Do you see how quickly that adds up in a week? L'ancêtre also talks about grass-fed cows and regenerative practices, which can shift some fatty acids toward omega-3 and CLA. That sounds appealing, yet the spoon still carries 6 grams saturated fat per 10 grams. Next, the real number one problem comes from mixing bricks and spreading them all day. Number one, no-name salted butter looks boring, and that is the point. That yellow label makes people grab it fast, then it becomes the butter they use daily in many homes. No Name sits in Loblaws banners, Real Canadian Superstore, No Frills, Zehrs, Atlantic Superstore, your independent grocer, and wholesale club. When a brick is everywhere, habit follows, and cheap default choices win. Per 10 grams, it lists 70 calories, 8 grams fat, 5 grams saturated fat, about 65 milligrams sodium, and 0 sugar with 0 carbs. Using Health Canada's 20 grams daily value for saturated plus trans fat, that pat hits about 1/4 of the day. Now picture the pattern. A sale hits. You toss extra bricks in the cart, then butter shows up in eggs, toast, grilled sandwiches, and any pan that needs flavor. 1 tablespoon becomes 2, cheese and pastries join, and the 20-gram line disappears. Canada's sodium intake runs about 2,700 to 3,400 milligrams per day, above the 2,300 milligrams upper level, so those 65 milligram servings matter once they stack. Nutrition scientists say all full-fat dairy butter comes with a heavy dose of saturated fat per tablespoon. That is why this brick belongs in the rare treat zone. Better pick number 3, Naturel Unsalted. Butter. Naturel Unsalted butter is a simple switch that changes one number people forget to count: sodium. If Naturel already lives in your fridge, this version keeps the same butter taste while giving you control over salt later. Per 10 grams, it sits around 70 calories, 8 grams fat, about 4.5 grams saturated, 0.2 grams trans fat, and 0 milligrams sodium. That does not erase the saturated fat, but it stops the automatic 60 to 70 milligrams sodium hit you get from many salted bricks. Health guidance points to 2,300 milligrams upper sodium for a day, with 1,500 milligrams as an ideal target, and many Canadians blow past that before dinner. Bread, cheese, deli meats, canned soups, and sauces carry salt already, so why let butter sneak in extra salt too? With unsalted butter, you season once at the end, and you taste what you are doing. Alberta Health Services still flags butter as high in saturated fat, so portion size matters even here. A scrape can be, and that habit saves grams week after week without feeling deprived. Use it for flavor, then lean on plant oils for the pan. Next, Avalon keeps that no-salt win and tightens ingredients further. Better pick number 2, Avalon Unsalted Butter. Avalon Organic Unsalted Butter feels like a calm, clean choice because the label often reads like a grocery receipt. Avalon is a British Columbia dairy built around certified organic milk and cream, so the brand story matches what many shoppers want. Per 10 grams, you get about 70 calories, 8 grams fat, 5 grams saturated, around 0.2 grams trans fat, and 0 milligrams sodium. Many listings keep ingredients to organic cream, which lines up with the common advice to pick the shortest ingredient list you can find. The key question stays portion size. When each 10-gram pat already uses about a quarter of the 20-gram daily value for saturated plus trans fat, a thick spread can turn into a big daily number fast. Do you want butter to be the main cooking fat, or do you want it as a finish for taste? Heart health advice often points people toward plant oils like olive or canola for everyday cooking. Then butter becomes a smaller accent. If you bake, unsalted butter helps you control salt in the recipe. Avalon fits that pattern because it gives flavor without adding salt. Next, Organic Meadow adds cultures that can make you use less. Better pick number 1, Organic Meadow Unsalted Butter. Organic Meadow Unsalted Butter aims at one job: keeping real butter flavor while skipping added salt. The brand runs as a Canadian co-op tied to organic milk from local farms, so the sourcing story stays simple and easy to check. A 10-gram serving sits around 70 calories, 8 grams fat, 5 grams saturated, about zero point 0.2 grams trans fat, and close to 0 milligrams sodium. That still means butter can hit the 20 grams saturated plus trans daily value quickly. So the win here is control, not unlimited use. The cultured version adds an interesting twist. Cultured butter lets bacteria ferment the cream before churning, which creates a tangy taste that feels stronger than a basic brick. When flavor hits faster, many people stop after a thinner spread, and that can cut grams without feeling like diet food. Ingredients often stay in cream and cultures. Diet advice around butter often pushes the same move. Use smaller amounts of stronger butter, then cook with plant oils like olive or canola. Do that, and butter becomes a finishing touch instead of a daily base. Next, I will show quick rules for choosing bricks and portions. Rules save taste, and numbers stay manageable. If any butter on this list lives in your fridge, tell me which one and why. Remember to hit that subscribe button because our research is just getting wilder.